The shot shattered the morning silence like thunder over desert mountains. Eleanor May tumbled out of the dusty stagecoach, her wedding dress torn and stained with red mud. She clutched a yellowed letter promising her a new life with her husband, Thomas Brennan, in Sage Creek, Arizona. Instead, she saw Sheriff Clayton standing over a fresh grave, his hat in his darkened hands. "Ma'am, I'm very sorry you had to come all this way," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "Your fiancé. He was killed 3 nights ago. There was a fight in the saloon." Eleanor's legs gave way beneath her. She had traveled 800 miles from St. Louis with nothing but hope and a promise to marry a man she had never seen. Now Thomas lay 6 feet under the desert soil, and she stood alone in a town that seemed like the end of the world. "One more thing," Sheriff Clayton continued, shifting nervously from one foot to the other. "Your husband left a child, a little girl about 5 years old. She's living with old Ezra Murphy, a gold prospector who found her wandering around the outskirts after Thomas died." Eleanor's heart skipped a beat. Thomas had never mentioned a daughter in his letters. The sheriff led her down the dusty main street of Sage Creek, past the Silver Dollar Saloon where Thomas had met his death, to a dilapidated cabin on the outskirts of town. There, sitting on the weathered porch, was the most unexpected pair she had ever seen. A gray-haired old gold miner with kind blue eyes and a little girl with wild auburn hair and bright green eyes that seemed too mature for her face. "This is Ezra Murphy," said the sheriff, "and this little troublemaker is Rose Brennan." Ezra rose slowly, studying Eleanor with the careful gaze of a man who had learned to read people quickly. "Madam," he said simply, "this child has been through hell. Her father was not a good example to her when he was alive, and she has mostly taken care of herself." Rose looked at Eleanor suspiciously, clenching her small fists. She had learned not to trust people. "Hello, Rose," Eleanor said softly, kneeling down to be at the same level as the girl. "I'm Eleanor. I was going to marry your father." "He's dead," Rose replied coldly, "and I don't need another person to abandon me." The words hurt Eleanor, but she heard the pain behind the defiance. This child had already been abandoned, left to fend for herself, forced to survive on the charity of strangers. In the days that followed, Eleanor learned the truth about Thomas Brennan. He was a gambler and an alcoholic who neglected Rose so he could play poker and drink whiskey. On the night of his death, he accused another player of cheating, a dangerous man named Marcus Caldwell, who was just as brutal in his cattle ranching and bootlegging. Caldwell intimidated half the county, Ezra explained as he sat by the fire, Rose sleeping restlessly on a pile of blankets. "He killed Thomas, but no one has the courage to prove it. All the witnesses have disappeared or changed their stories." Eleanor felt a cold rage rising in her chest. This girl had lost her father to a murderer who was still at large, protected by fear and corruption. Weeks turned into months, and Eleanor made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. She would stay in Sage Creek. She found a job at a general store, rented a small house, and slowly, cautiously, began to build a relationship with Rose. The girl was tough as raw leather and twice as stubborn. She could track a rabbit in rocky terrain, build a fire in a downpour, and had a vocabulary that would make a cavalry sergeant blush. But she was also smart, hungry for knowledge, and desperate for someone who wouldn't abandon her. Eleanor began teaching Rose to read from old newspapers and cheap novels. In return, Rose taught her how to survive in the harsh environment, which plants were edible, how to read the weather, how to handle a gun when coyotes got too close to the chickens. Ezra became their unexpected patriarch, sharing his food and stories with them, teaching Rose the patient art of gold mining and reading the land. He had never had children of his own, and Rose filled the void in his heart that he had carried with him for decades. But Marcus Caldwell had no intention of leaving the Brennan family alone. One hot July day, Caldwell arrived in town with his men, making it clear that Eleanor's presence was making him nervous. A mail-order bride asking questions about her late husband's business could uncover things that were better left hidden. "You'd better leave," he told Eleanor outside the store, his voice soft but threatening. "This is no place for women who don't know their place." Eleanor met his gaze without flinching. "I've found my place, Mr. Caldwell. Right here, with my daughter." That night, someone tried to set fire to their house. Only Rose's keen hearing, honed by years of restless sleep, saved them. She woke up to the smell of smoke and pulled Eleanor out of the house before the flames could spread. The message was clear: leave or face the worst. Instead, Eleanor bought a gun. She spent the next 2 years learning everything she could about Marcus Caldwell's activities. She discovered that he wasn't just a cattle rancher. He was smuggling weapons to Apache raiders, selling them to both sides of the conflict for maximum profit. Thomas stumbled upon evidence of this on the night he died. Eleanor also learned something else. She was stronger than she could have imagined. The soft city woman who had stepped off the stagecoach had become someone tougher and more determined. Rose had also changed, transforming from a wild, distrustful child into a young woman who could outgun most men in the area, but still huddled close to Eleanor during thunderstorms. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A wounded Apache warrior, injured during his escape from Caldwell's ambush, got into a shootout with arms smugglers and stumbled upon Ezra's camp. Instead of turning him in for the reward, Ezra and Eleanor nursed him back to health. In broken English, the warrior told them about Caldwell's activities, how he sold weapons to the Apaches, and then told the army where to find them, taking money from both sides while people died in the crossfire. "He killed many of my people," the warrior said, "and many of yours. He is a snake that feeds on war." Eleanor knew they had proof, but getting anyone to believe them, or act on that proof, was virtually impossible. Caldwell had too many people in his pocket, and too many others intimidated. The solution came from Rose, who was now 12 and as sharp as a tack. "Why don't we make him confess?" she suggested. "Pride makes people stupid, especially people like him." Eleanor looked at her daughter. When had she started thinking that way about Rose? And realized that the girl was right. Caldwell's arrogance was his weakness. They devised a plan that was as ingenious as it was dangerous. Eleanor would approach Caldwell and tell him she had found evidence of Thomas's illegal activities and wanted to sell the information to protect herself and Rose. She would wear a listening device, a new invention Ezra had purchased from a traveling craftsman, and record Caldwell's confession. The meeting took place at the Silver Dollar Saloon, the same place where Thomas had died. Eleanor sat across from Caldwell, her heart pounding, but her voice was steady. "Thomas kept records," she lied smoothly. "Names, dates, delivery details, everything about your arms smuggling." Caldwell narrowed his eyes. "You're bluffing." "Really?" He wrote about the Apache ambush at Mesquite Ridge, about how you sold them Winchester rifles, and then told Colonel Harrison exactly where to find their camp. 23 people died that day, Marcus, including women and children. For a moment, Caldwell's mask slipped. Thomas was too stupid to keep records, and too drunk to remember what he saw. "But not too drunk to recognize you when you put a bullet in his chest," Eleanor insisted. "Not too drunk to realize you killed him to keep him from talking." Caldwell leaned forward, his voice a whisper. That fool stumbled upon something bigger than his whiskey-soaked brain could comprehend. "He saw me meeting with Delgado, the Apache chief, and threatened to go to the army. I couldn't let that happen." Eleanor's pulse quickened. He had confessed. "The arms trade is profitable in this territory," Caldwell continued. "White men need weapons to fight the Indians. The Indians need weapons to fight the white men. I just make sure both sides stay armed and hostile. It's good business." "What about the innocent people who die?" Caldwell shrugged. "That's the price of progress, my dear. Your husband learned that the hard way." Eleanor had heard enough. She stood up to leave, but Caldwell grabbed her wrist. "Where are you going? You know too much, just like Thomas." The saloon fell silent. Too silent. Eleanor realized with growing horror that Caldwell's men had surrounded the building while they were talking. But Marcus Caldwell had underestimated the Brennan women. Rose burst through the back door of the saloon with Ezra's old Colt in her hands, while Ezra himself ran out the front door with a Winchester rifle. The Apache warrior they had helped, named Joseph Iron Bear, appeared in a side window with 3 of his brothers, all armed and ready for battle. "Looks like you're getting outnumbered, Caldwell," Eleanor said, breaking free from his grip. The standoff lasted only a few seconds. Faced with certain death, Caldwell's men dropped their weapons. The recording device captured everything, and the witnesses finally found the courage to speak up. Marcus Caldwell was arrested, convicted, and hanged for murder and treason. His criminal empire collapsed, and peace reigned in the territory for the first time in many years. Eleanor and Rose remained in Sage Creek and built a life that neither of them could have imagined. 2 years later, Eleanor married Ezra in a modest ceremony at sunset in the desert, with Rose standing proudly as maid of honor, and Joseph Iron Bear blessing the 2 peoples who had finally found peace. Rose grew into a remarkable woman, following the lessons of strength and resilience taught to her by Eleanor. She became the first female sheriff in the territory, following in the footsteps of her grandmother, who showed her that being strong meant standing up for justice, no matter the cost. Years later, Eleanor sat on her porch, watching the sunset paint the desert mountains gold, and remembered that first terrifying day when she stepped off the stagecoach and found herself in the midst of tragedy. She lost the life she had planned, but she gained something far more valuable: a daughter, a family, and the understanding that even in the harshest of places, love and courage can take root and blossom. The Wild West tested Eleanor May and Rose Brennan, and they emerged stronger than the desert itself. Ready to hear more stories from America's frontier past? Subscribe to our channel and tell us where you're watching in the comments. Do you have ancestors who lived during the Wild West era? Share their stories with us. Every family has tales of courage, survival, and the indomitable American spirit that built our country from sea to sea.